Hi all, my name's John Craddock and I work in a company called Adaptemy. We're just a startup company and we do educational software. So you can see the kid there, she's typing the lessons into her computer and the computer corrects them all up and tells the teacher how she's doing and that type of carry on. That's what we do. And yeah, I went off jQuery for Lent this year, so I just thought I'd let you know why I did it at all and how I got on. Why I did it started with this function here. I don't know if you can read that, but it's a simple enough function. It logs output to an element on the page. It was just so I could demo a piece of functionality to some people in the company, some non-technical people. And it worked fine. I sent it off, no problem. And then afterwards, when I kind of looked back and admired my work, I realized I'd sent out a page. It was about 100 kilobytes big, and 95 of those kilobytes were the jQuery library. And I'd only actually used two methods in the jQuery library. There's the query selector method to get the element with ID log. And in there's a HTML element just to edit that element's HTML. And both of those methods that I used have native JavaScript equivalents. So basically, I'd added the jQuery library to this page just because I was in the habit of adding jQuery libraries to pages. I kind of always done it, and it never occurred to me that I should probably stop, or I don't need to always do it. So I decided, this happened springtime, so I decided I'm suffering from a minor addiction to jQuery, so I'll just give it up for 6 weeks and see how I get on. So when I was planning kind of why to do it or whether to do it, the question of why should I give up jQuery is one that naturally reverses itself. The question really is, why do I use jQuery? What do I use it for? And I decided these are the main things I use it for. The big one, I think the reason it exists is to iron out browser inconsistencies. I use it for the handy UX animations, making pop-up boxes appear, elements on the page, collapse, expand, things like that. I use it for DOM manipulation, like in that last function there, editing HTML and whatnot. And then also there's loads of plugins. So that's what's handy about it. So just going through the 4 of them, in my current job, I'm lucky. We only have to support Explorer 9 upwards. And the browser inconsistencies in Explorer 9, they're still there, but there's much fewer of them than there are in 7 and 8. Explorer 9 runs on ECMAScript 5, and the inconsistencies, they're fairly well known and fairly well documented, so importing the whole library just to get around them is a bit of overkill. The UX animations, I've highlighted this in red because this is by far the most important thing I'm going to say today. You should not be using JavaScript for these UX animations anymore. We only ever use JavaScript because CSS wasn't able to do them. CSS is now able to do them, and CSS is way better at them. So just stop. Even if you have to use jQuery for other reasons in your code, really you shouldn't be using it for this. The problem with, there's a lot of problems with using the animate function. The big one is it's a kind of a recursive function that will put 100 or so calls onto your event loop, which on smaller devices and things will really clog up the device and make it terrible for the user. CSS, in a lot of these devices, the CSS transitions are connected directly to the graphics processor, so it's a much better experience for your end user. Also, it cleans up your JavaScript code a whole lot. Now your JavaScript code is only in charge of maintaining the front-end model, which is all it really should have been doing to begin with, but it had to do this other job because CSS wasn't up to it. So if you get nothing else from this talk, learn CSS transitions. So DOM manipulation, that's another thing I use it for. And for light DOM manipulation, I found you don't need it at all. Like that log function, I didn't need to use it. And even heavier stuff than that, I really didn't need to be using it. For heavy DOM manipulation, you probably do want to be importing some kind of a library. But then if you're doing heavy DOM manipulation, you probably have a specific purpose in mind. You're probably doing, we do a lot of charts, graphs and things, and there are specific libraries for that. If you're writing games or something, there are specific libraries for that. I'm not ragging on jQuery at all. I mean, there are cases where it is the correct choice to make, but I was using it in every choice, even where it wasn't. And then plugins, there's a load of plugins for jQuery. I'm not going to tell you to write your own image slider if you need an image slider. But then maybe when you start searching, search for JavaScript plugin rather than jQuery plugin. It might be that you need to import jQuery for a lot of these. And how am I doing for time, by the way? What?
1 minute.
1 minute. OK, I was going to go through a bunch of code examples of how to replace the common jQuery functions. But you can look most of them up online, and I'll leave these here. I'll go to 2 of them. So the query selector, that's the function you'd use the most. There exists a vanilla JS query selector all, which is basically the same thing. You add a CSS-like selector, and it returns a NodeList of all the elements it has one really irritating feature, which is a NodeList doesn't have a for each function attached to it. So you get these elements, most of the time you get a bunch of elements, you want to loop through them to add an event listener or do the thing you got them for to begin with. You can write a for.length of thing 100 times, but that's really old school. Yep, so that's it. NodeList for each does not exist. One possible solution is to rob the array for each function. There's a few reasons why this isn't a good idea. I find the best thing to do is to just write a quick for each function, a little helper function. So you have window.forEach, it loops through everything for you. And then in the future, you can just call for each your node list, and then it works like the array function from there. I think that's the best solution to that irritating problem. And I'll skip through to the last one of these. You can look at these yourself. Oh yeah, instead of .on, you have .add event listener, Listener. Make sure to spell that one correctly. I've spent half an hour debugging a spelling mistake more than once. I think that might be why jQuery called it .on. You won't miss that. Document.ready is fine. Oh yeah, searching up the DOM tree. So the query selector will search down the DOM tree for child elements. jQuery has this closest function, which will search up the DOM tree. Normally you'd use that for if somebody has clicked the close button or something and you search up for the box that contained that close button to close the box. There's no vanilla JavaScript equivalent. There are little plugins you could use. You could even write your own. But every time I've needed to use it, I've just refactored my code and ended up with better quality code as a result. So I've kind of concluded that wanting to use the closest function is a bit of a red flag for your code is badly formatted. Maybe go back and have a look at the formatting of your code. I'm not saying that there is no valid use case for it, but the 4 or 5 times I've found myself reaching for it recently, I've always found I shouldn't have been reaching for it at all. So that's the end of my talk. Basically, don't use .language.